The spring trial of 14-year-old Kent Blake drew crowds from 4 counties. Cameras flashed as he walked in, grinning, humming beneath his breath. For Kent, this wasn't punishment, it was performance. He said it was an accident, an old heater, a spark, a tragic fire. His lawyer painted him as a confused boy who didn't understand. But detectives knew the story reeked of design. They found too much order in the chaos. The cut power lines, the repositioned chairs, the missing batteries from smoke alarms. Still, Kent smirked through it all, certain no one could touch him. Then, on the 5th day of trial, the courtroom's doors opened, and his little sister, a pale 11-year-old, walked to the stand. She hadn't spoken publicly before that moment. What she said stole the air from the room. From that point forward, it wasn't a story about fire, or accident, or immaturity. It was a story about a boy who thought laughter could bury guilt, and the sister who refused to let him rewrite it. The Maple Crest County Courthouse sat on a hill overlooking the town square. A red brick building with white columns and narrow windows that made it look stern, even on sunny days. Inside, the main courtroom smelled of old wood and floor wax. By 9 in the morning on a Tuesday in late April, every seat was filled. This was the kind of case that drew attention, a family fire. 2 parents dead, 2 children surviving. One of them accused of murder. Kent Blake sat at the defense table, wearing khaki pants and a button-down shirt that looked borrowed from someone larger. He was 14, thin, with sandy brown hair that stuck up slightly in the back no matter how much it was combed. His face had the unfinished quality of adolescence, features not quite settled into what they'd become. But it was his expression that people noticed most. He wasn't scared. He wasn't sad. He looked entertained. His attorney, Marcus Lowell, sat beside him shuffling papers. Lowell was 62, with grey hair and wire-rimmed glasses. A public defender who'd handled dozens of juvenile cases, but none quite like this. He kept glancing at Kent with an expression that hovered between professional duty and private discomfort. Across the aisle, prosecutor Shelby Nguyen organized her files with calm precision. She was 39, sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled back and an economy of movement that suggested complete control. Beside her, Detective Howard Vernon reviewed his notes. He was 51, broad-shouldered, with 26 years in law enforcement and a face that had seen enough to recognize performance when he saw it. The gallery was divided. On the left sat community members, teachers, neighbors, people who'd known the Blake family. On the right, journalists and court observers, cameras ready, notebooks open. In the very back row, mostly hidden from view, sat a social worker with an 11-year-old girl. The girl had blonde hair pulled into a ponytail and wore a blue sweater that was too big for her. Her name was Emma Blake, Kent's younger sister. She stared at the floor and didn't look up when people entered. Judge Patricia Warner took the bench. Everyone rose. She was 54, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd presided over the juvenile division for 12 years and had developed a reputation for fairness, tempered with zero tolerance for manipulation. "Be seated," Judge Warner said. Her voice carried authority without harshness. "We are here for the arraignment of Kent Blake, case number 24-2791. This matter was transferred from standard juvenile proceedings to juvenile court with enhanced review following a preliminary hearing on March 15th. Mr. Blake, Please stand. Kent stood slowly, almost lazily. He stretched slightly as he rose, as if waking from a nap. Lowell stood beside him, one hand lightly touching Kent's arm, in a gesture that looked more like restraint than support. Judge Warner reviewed the charges. Mr. Blake, you are charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of David Blake, age 43, and Susan Blake, age 41, on the night of February 9th. You are additionally charged with arson and reckless endangerment. How do you plead? Kent leaned toward the microphone. His voice was clear, almost cheerful. Not guilty, Your Honor. A snicker escaped his lips as he said it. Just a small sound, quickly suppressed, but audible in the silent courtroom. Several people in the gallery exchanged glances. Judge Warner's eyes narrowed. Mr. Blake, she said, her tone dropping several degrees. You will control yourself in this courtroom. This is not entertainment. Do you understand? Kent straightened slightly, his smile fading into something more neutral. Yes, Your Honor. The plea is entered. Mr. Blake will remain in juvenile detention pending trial. Trial date is set for April 23rd. Counsel, approach. As the attorneys moved forward, Kent turned slightly in his chair and scanned the gallery. His eyes found a camera lens. He didn't wave, but his mouth curved slightly, and he held the gaze for a beat too long. The photographer, uncomfortable, lowered his camera. Shelby Nguyen returned to her table and pulled out the preliminary fire marshal's report. She read through it again, noting the sections that would need deeper explanation at trial. Initial assessment suggested mechanical malfunction of an old space heater, but the supplemental investigation had found inconsistencies: cut wiring, tampered safety valves, missing smoke detector batteries. The report's final line read, "Further investigation recommended. Pattern inconsistent with accidental ignition." She looked across at Kent, who was now whispering something to Lowell. Whatever he said made him grin. Lowell's face remained impassive, but his jaw tightened. Nguyen closed the folder and wrote a single note on her legal pad. He's proud of the flames. That evening, Detective Vernon met with the arson investigation team in a conference room at the police department. Lead investigator Sarah Chen spread photographs across the table. The Blake house, or what remained of it. Charred walls, collapsed roof sections, blackened furniture. "Walk me through it again," Vernon said. Chen pointed to a photograph of the living room. Fire started here. Multiple ignition points, which immediately raises questions. Space heater was found here, tipped over. Initial theory was it malfunctioned and ignited nearby curtains. But, Vernon prompted. But the heater's internal safety shutoff was disabled. Someone removed the thermal fuse. You don't do that accidentally. She pulled out another photo. Also, we found accelerant residue. Not much, but enough. Gas can residue on the floor near the couch and hallway. Where was the gas can? Garage. Fingerprints on the handle. Kent's? Kent's, Chen confirmed. Also found prints on a screwdriver from the garage toolbox. Same screwdriver that matches the tool marks on the heater's casing where the safety fuse was removed. Vernon leaned back. So, he disabled the heater, tipped it over, added accelerant, and lit it. That's what the evidence suggests. There's more. Smoke detectors throughout the house had no batteries, All 4 units. Someone removed them. When? Can't be certain, but the family's neighbor said she saw Kent in the garage the afternoon before the fire, carrying a toolbox inside. She thought he was helping with repairs. Vernon looked at the photographs again. What about the parents' bedroom? Where were they when it started? Chen pulled out a crime scene diagram. Both victims were found in bed. Autopsy showed they died of smoke inhalation before significant burns. Toxicology came back clean, no sedatives, no alcohol beyond normal levels. But here's the thing. The bedroom door was closed. Not just closed, but blocked. Blocked. A chair had been wedged under the doorknob from the outside. Fire marshal found it when the door was forced open. The chair was partially burned, but still in position. Vernon was very still. Someone trapped them. Yes. Where were the kids? Kent claimed he woke up, smelled smoke, ran to his sister's room, grabbed her, and got out through a window. Emma's room is on the ground floor. Window faces the backyard. When firefighters arrived, both kids were in the yard. Kent was holding Emma. Neighbors said he was crying, saying he tried to get to his parents, but couldn't. What does Emma say? Chen hesitated. She hasn't said much. She's been with Child Protective Services since that night. They've had her in counseling. She's traumatized, non-verbal most of the time. Social workers say she's starting to open up, but slowly. Vernon gathered the photographs. We need to talk to her, carefully, but we need to know what she saw. Nguyen's already working on it, Chen said, but you know how it is with kids, especially trauma victims. Courts are protective. We might not get much. Vernon looked at the photograph of the Blake house, blackened and skeletal against the winter sky. She's the only other person who was there. If Kent did this, she knows. The trial began 3 weeks later. The courtroom was even more crowded than the arraignment. Kent entered in the same borrowed shirt, same neutral khakis, same slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He walked slowly, looking around like a tourist taking in a museum. When he reached the defense table, he sat down and immediately leaned back, arms crossed, surveying the jury box with open curiosity. The jury had been selected over 2 days. 12 citizens carefully vetted. 6 men, 6 women. A teacher, a retired electrician, a nurse, a small business owner, a college student, a factory supervisor. People asked to decide if a 14-year-old boy had murdered his parents. Marcus Lowell delivered his opening statement with measured care. He painted Kent as a troubled but misunderstood child, a boy with a high intelligence quotient but poor social skills, a son who clashed with demanding parents, a teenager who made mistakes but didn't understand their full consequences. Kent Blake is 14 years old, Lowell said. He's a child. Children do not plan murders. They act on impulse, on emotion, on confusion. Yes, there was a fire. Yes, his parents died. But this was a tragic accident compounded by poor judgment, not a calculated crime. The state wants you to see a monster. I ask you to see a confused boy who made terrible mistakes and will live with the consequences forever. Several jurors nodded slightly. Others looked unconvinced. Shelby Nguyen's opening was direct and precise. She laid out the timeline: the disabled heater, the removed smoke detector batteries, the accelerant, the blocked bedroom door, the physical evidence placing Kent at the center of every suspicious element. "This was not an accident," Nguyen said. "This was a plan. Kent Blake wanted attention. He wanted to be noticed. He wanted to be important. And he decided the way to achieve that was to eliminate the people who set boundaries for him, and then position himself as the tragic survivor. He staged this fire. He trapped his parents. He ensured they couldn't escape. And then he walked outside with his sister and performed grief for the cameras." She paused, letting the words settle. "The evidence will show you the truth. Not the story Kent Blake wants you to believe, but what actually happened in that house on the night of February 9th. And it will show you that this 14-year-old boy understood exactly what he was doing." The first witnesses were the responding firefighters. Captain Luis Mendez described arriving at the scene at 11:42 post-meridium, finding the house fully engulfed, and locating 2 children in the backyard. He described Kent as appearing shaken, holding his sister, telling them his parents were still inside. "What was the defendant's demeanor?" Nguyen asked. "He was crying, saying he tried to save them, kept repeating that it was an accident." "Did anything about his behavior strike you as unusual?" Mendez hesitated. "In the moment, no. But later, when we were clearing the scene, I saw him watching the house burn from the ambulance. He wasn't crying anymore. He was just watching. And at one point, I thought I saw him smile." "Objection," Lowell said. "Speculation about facial expressions." "Your Honor," Nguyen said, "the witness is describing what he observed." "I'll allow it," Judge Warner said. "Jurors can weigh the credibility." During cross-examination, Lowell tried to reframe the testimony. "Captain Mendez, isn't it possible what you interpreted as a smile was actually a stress response, a nervous reaction?" "Possible," Mendez said, "but it didn't look nervous to me." The medical examiner, Dr. Alan Reeves, testified about the cause of death. Both victims died from smoke inhalation. Neither showed signs of struggle or attempts to escape. Both were found in bed. "Dr. Reeves," Nguyen asked, "what does it tell you that the victims were found in bed with no signs of escape attempts?" "It suggests they were either overcome very quickly or unable to reach the exit. Could they have been trapped?" "Objection," Lowell said. "Leading." "Sustained. Rephrase." "Dr. Reeves, if the bedroom door had been blocked from the outside, would that be consistent with your findings?" "Yes. If they woke to smoke and found the door blocked, they would have succumbed quickly to inhalation." At the defense table, Kent leaned toward Lowell and whispered something. Lowell shook his head sharply. Kent sat back, his smile widening slightly. The arson investigator, Sarah Chen, took the stand and walked the jury through the technical evidence. The disabled heater, the accelerant traces, the missing smoke detector batteries, the fingerprints on the gas can and screwdriver. Each piece of evidence was displayed on screens at the front of the courtroom. "Miss Chen," Nguyen said, "in your professional opinion, was this fire accidental?" "No. The evidence shows deliberate planning. Multiple safety systems were disabled. Accelerant was introduced. Ignition points were staged. This was arson." Could a 14-year-old accomplish this level of staging? Absolutely. The methods used were not sophisticated. They required only basic knowledge and access to household tools. During cross-examination, Lowell challenged the certainty of her conclusions. "Miss Chen, is it possible some of these elements were coincidental? That the smoke detector batteries died naturally? All four at once? Unlikely. But not impossible. Not impossible, but the probability is extremely low. And the fingerprints on the gas can, couldn't they have been from earlier use? From mowing the lawn or refueling equipment? The prints were fresh, based on the residue transfer. They were made shortly before the fire. Lowell pressed, but Chen held firm on every point. That afternoon, a psychiatrist named Dr. Ellen Marks testified for the prosecution. She had evaluated Kent during the investigation phase, conducting a series of interviews and assessments. Dr. Marks, Nguyen began, what were your findings regarding Kent Blake's psychological state? Kent presents with significant narcissistic traits. He displays a lack of empathy, an inflated sense of self-importance, and a preoccupation with being noticed or admired. During our sessions, he frequently redirected conversations to himself and showed little genuine emotion when discussing his parents' deaths. Did he express remorse? He expressed what I would characterize as performative remorse. He said the words he thought were expected, but there was no emotional congruence, no authentic grief. Can you elaborate? Dr. Marks referred to her notes. In one session, I asked him to describe his relationship with his parents. He said they didn't understand him, that they held him back. When I asked how their deaths made him feel, he said, and I quote, sad, I guess, but now people actually listen when I talk. A murmur moved through the gallery. One juror leaned forward, staring at Kent. Kent, at the defense table, looked at his hands and suppressed what might have been a smile. Dr. Marks, Nguyen continued, did you review any of Kent's written work? Yes, his school essays. One in particular stood out. It was titled Heroes and Planning. In it, Kent wrote, heroes are just people who plan chaos well. Everyone remembers them. The courtroom went silent. Nguyen let the statement hang in the air before continuing. In your professional opinion, Dr. Marks, does Kent Blake understand the difference between right and wrong? Yes, he understands. He simply doesn't care in the way most people do. For Kent, the consequences of actions are measured in attention received, not harm caused. Lowell's cross-examination was aggressive. He challenged her methodology, questioned her bias, suggested that short evaluations couldn't capture the complexity of a teenage mind. Dr. Marks responded calmly to each question, her conclusions unchanged. As she stepped down, Kent leaned toward Lowell again. This time his whisper was audible to the nearest juror. She makes me sound way cooler than I am. Lowell closed his eyes briefly. The juror wrote something in her notes. During the recess that followed, Shelby Nguyen met with Detective Vernon in a small conference room. They reviewed the witness list and the evidence still to be presented. We're building the case, Vernon said. But I'm worried it's all circumstantial. Physical evidence, psychological profile, timeline. It's strong, but Lowell's going to argue reasonable doubt all the way. Nguyen nodded. That's why we need Emma. Vernon looked uncomfortable. She's 11. She's traumatized, and she's his sister. Are we sure about this? The social worker says she's ready, says she's been asking when she can tell people what really happened. What did happen? Nguyen pulled out a folder containing preliminary interview transcripts. According to Emma, Kent woke her up before the fire started, told her to get dressed and be ready. She didn't understand why. She heard him moving around in the house. heard her parents' bedroom door close. Then she smelled smoke. Did she see him start the fire? She saw enough, and she heard him. Vernon, she's the only witness who can put him in the house, active and aware, before the ignition. Without her, we've got a strong circumstantial case. With her, we've got direct evidence of premeditation. Vernon was quiet for a moment. He's going to be in the courtroom when she testifies, staring at her. I know. Can she handle that? The social worker thinks so, but there's only one way to find out. The trial resumed the next day. Detective Vernon took the stand and walked the jury through the investigation. The initial response, the evidence collection, the interviews, the timeline reconstruction. Detective Vernon, Nguyen asked, when did you first suspect this was not an accident? Within the first 48 hours. The physical evidence didn't match Kent's story. He claimed the fire started suddenly and spread fast, but the disabled safety systems suggested planning. And his behavior during questioning was unusual. How so? He was too calm, too detailed. When people experience genuine trauma, their memories are fragmented. Kent's story was precise, almost rehearsed, and he kept adding details that seemed designed to make him look heroic. Such as? He described trying to break down his parents' bedroom door, but there were no marks on his hands or arms, no bruising, no cuts, nothing to suggest he'd attempted forceful entry. What did that tell you? That he was lying. During cross-examination, Lowell tried to undermine Vernon's interpretation. Detective, you're not a psychologist, are you? No. So your assessment of Kent's behavior is based on your personal opinion, not scientific analysis. It's based on 26 years of interviewing witnesses and suspects. I know the difference between trauma and performance. But it's still subjective. Human behavior is always subjective to some degree, but patterns are recognizable. Lowell didn't pursue it further. That afternoon, Nguyen made her announcement. Your Honor, the state intends to call Emma Blake as a witness. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Warner banged her gavel once. Order! Lowell stood immediately. Your Honor, the defense objects strenuously. Emma Blake is 11 years old and has undergone significant trauma. She is not competent to testify. Your Honor, Nguyen countered. Emma Blake has been evaluated by licensed professionals who have determined she is capable of providing testimony. She has relevant, material knowledge of the events in question. The court has an obligation to hear her. Judge Warner looked at both attorneys. I'll hear arguments in chambers. Bailiff, 15-minute recess. In chambers, the debate continued. Lowell argued that Emma was too young, too traumatized, and potentially coached. Nguyen presented psychological evaluations showing Emma was competent, coherent, and insistent on testifying. She provided transcripts of preliminary interviews showing consistency in Emma's account. Judge Warner reviewed the materials carefully. Finally, she made her decision. I'm going to allow the testimony. Emma Blake will be questioned in age-appropriate language. If at any point I determine she is unable to continue, we will stop. But she has the right to be heard, and the court has an obligation to consider all relevant evidence. When court reconvened, the ruling was announced. Kent, at the defense table, stopped smiling. His eyes darted toward the door at the back of the courtroom, Then he leaned toward Lowell and whispered urgently. Lowell's response was sharp and quiet. Kent sat back, his expression tightening. The next morning, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. People stood along the walls. Journalists filled every available space. Everyone knew what was coming. Emma Blake was going to testify. At 10 ante-meridium, the doors at the back opened. The social worker entered first, then Emma. She wore a blue cardigan over a white shirt and dark pants. Her blonde hair was pulled back. She looked small and pale, but she walked steadily. She didn't look at the gallery. She didn't look at Kent. She looked straight ahead at Judge Warner. Kent watched her approach. For the first time in the entire trial, his smile was completely gone. His face had gone carefully blank. Emma was sworn in. The bailiff lowered the Bible so she could reach it. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I do." She sat in the witness chair. A booster cushion had been placed on the seat so she could be seen clearly. Judge Warner spoke to her gently. "Emma, do you understand why you're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you understand that you need to tell the truth?" "Yes." "If you need a break at any time, you just let me know, okay?" Emma nodded. Shelby Nguyen approached slowly, giving Emma space. "Emma, can you tell the jury your name and your age?" "My name is Emma Blake. I'm 11. "And Kent Blake is your brother?" "Yes." "Do you remember the night of February 9th? Emma's hands tightened in her lap. She took a breath. "Yes." "Can you tell us what you remember about that night?" Emma looked down at her hands, then back up. Her voice was steady but quiet. "Kent woke me up. It was late. He told me to get dressed and put on my shoes." "Did he say why?" "He said there was going to be a fire. He said I needed to be ready to go outside." The courtroom went utterly still. Several jurors leaned forward. Kent's hands gripped the edge of the table. Nguyen continued carefully. "Did you ask him what he meant?" "I asked if there was a fire already. He said, not yet. He said I should wait in my room and he'd come get me." "What did you do?" "I got dressed. I waited. I heard him walking around in the house. I heard him in the garage. Then I heard him go upstairs." "Could you hear anything else?" Emma's voice dropped lower. "I heard my parents' bedroom door close. Then I heard something scraping, like furniture moving." "What happened next?" "I waited. I was scared. Then I smelled smoke. Kent came back to my room and said it was time to go. He opened my window and we went outside." "Did you see the fire?" "Not at first, but then I looked back and saw smoke coming from the windows. Kent was standing there watching, and he was smiling." Her voice broke slightly on the last word. "Emma," Nguyen said gently, "did Kent say anything while you were outside?" Emma nodded. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He said, 'Now they'll listen to me.' He said, 'You'll thank me later when everyone looks at us.'" The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Judge Warner banged her gavel. "Order! Order in this court!" Kent sat frozen at the defense table. His face had gone white. His eyes were locked on Emma. His mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came out. Nguyen waited for silence. "Emma, are you certain those were his words?" "Yes." "Did he seem upset or scared?" "No, he seemed happy." "Thank you, Emma. No further questions." Marcus Lowell approached for cross-examination, but his heart clearly wasn't in it. He asked gentle questions, trying to suggest Emma might be confused, might be misremembering. Emma answered each question with the same quiet consistency. "Emma, it was nighttime. It was dark. Could you have misunderstood what Kent said?" "No, I heard him." "You were scared. Trauma can affect memory." "I remember what happened." "Did anyone tell you what to say today?" "No, I'm just telling the truth." Lowell had nothing left. He sat down. Judge Warner looked at Emma. "Emma, you did very well. You can step down now." Emma stood slowly. As she walked past the defense table, she stopped for just a moment and looked at Kent. He looked back at her. For the first time, his expression showed something real. Not remorse. Fear. The fear of someone who had finally been seen clearly. Emma walked out of the courtroom with the social worker. The doors closed behind her. The silence that followed was profound. Nguyen stood. "Your Honor, the state rests." The trial proceeded, but everyone knew it was over. Lowell put on a defense, called character witnesses, tried to salvage what he could. But Emma's testimony had changed everything. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Kent Blake, guilty of 2 counts of murder in the 1st degree. We find the defendant guilty of arson. We find the defendant guilty of reckless endangerment." Kent sat motionless. He stared at the table. No smile, no performance, just stillness. Sentencing was held 1 week later. The courtroom was quieter this time. The initial media frenzy had given way to something more somber. Emma gave a victim impact statement. She stood at the podium, the social worker beside her, and spoke clearly. "Kent was my brother. I loved him, but he hurt our parents. He planned it. He did it. And he didn't care." She paused. "He thought people would look at us. They do, but not the way he wanted. He doesn't get to laugh anymore." She stepped down. Kent, at the defense table, kept his head lowered. He didn't look at her. Then Judge Warner spoke. She looked at Kent for a long moment before beginning. "Kent Blake," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. "This court has watched you throughout these proceedings. We saw your laughter during testimony about your parents' deaths. We saw your smirks when witnesses described the horror of that night. We saw your performance. This court saw your laughter and mistook it for adolescence, for immaturity, for a child's inability to process grief. But your sister's words revealed something different. They revealed a mind that understood cruelty and enjoyed it." Judge Warner's voice hardened. "You woke your sister and told her to prepare. You disabled every safety system in your home. You trapped your parents in their bedroom. You started a fire. And then you stood outside and smiled. You told your 11-year-old sister that people would finally listen to you. that she would thank you later. Those are not the words of a confused child. Those are the words of someone who planned, executed, and took pride in murder. She paused, letting the words settle. Throughout this trial, you treated this courtroom like a stage. You thought your age would protect you. You thought your smile would charm people. You thought you could rewrite the narrative and make yourself the tragic hero of your own story. But your sister told the truth. And the truth is that you murdered your parents for attention, for validation, for the twisted belief that being the survivor of tragedy would make you important. Judge Warner's voice dropped lower. You thought fire made you powerful. It didn't. It only left ashes and truth behind. Your parents are dead. Your sister has been traumatized. Your community has been devastated. And you, Kent Blake, will spend a significant portion of your life in confinement as a direct result of your choices. She picked up the sentencing document. The law recognizes that you are a juvenile. It provides pathways for review and potential rehabilitation. But it also recognizes that some crimes, regardless of the perpetrator's age, demand serious consequences. This court sentences you to life in juvenile confinement with adult review at age 25. At that time, the court will determine whether you have demonstrated genuine rehabilitation and remorse. Until then, you will remain in the custody of the juvenile justice system. Judge Warner's voice took on a tone of finality. Remorse cannot be forced, but silence will teach you what laughter never could. Perhaps in the years ahead, you will come to understand the magnitude of what you took from this world. Perhaps you will develop the capacity for genuine empathy, but that is for you to discover. This court's obligation is to justice, and justice demands that you be held accountable. She set the document down. Bailiff, remand the defendant. 2 officers approached. Kent stood slowly. He didn't resist. His face was pale, blank, empty of all the performance that had defined him throughout the trial. As he was led toward the side door, he glanced back once at the empty witness stand where Emma had sat. Then he was gone. Outside the courthouse, Shelby Nguyen gave a brief statement to the press. Justice was served today, not because it brings back David and Susan Blake. Nothing can. But because the truth was told. Emma Blake showed extraordinary courage in coming forward. Her testimony ensured that her parents' deaths were not rewritten as an accident by the person responsible for them. Detective Vernon stood beside her. When the reporters dispersed, he said quietly, "She's 11 years old, and she stood up there and faced him down." "She's stronger than he ever was," Nguyen said. Inside the courthouse, Emma sat with her social worker in a quiet room. She didn't cry, she just sat, looking at her hands. "You did really well," the social worker said. Emma nodded. "I just told the truth." "I know, and that took a lot of courage." Emma looked up. "Will he ever get out?" "Maybe, when he's older, but only if the court believes he's changed." Emma thought about that. "He won't change." He liked what he did. The social worker didn't have an answer for that. In the weeks that followed, the case prompted legislative discussion. Advocates pushed for new protocols requiring trained counseling representation for child survivors testifying in violent crime cases. The legislation, informally called Emma's Law, passed 6 months later. Kent Blake was transferred to a juvenile correctional facility in eastern Tennessee. He was processed, evaluated, and placed in a secure unit. He no longer smiled. He no longer performed. He was quiet, compliant, and utterly withdrawn. The psychologists who evaluated him noted a complete absence of affect. No remorse, no anger, just emptiness. The photographs from the trial, particularly the ones of Kent smirking in the courtroom, circulated for months. They became the image people remembered. Not the pale, blank-faced boy who was led away in handcuffs, but the grinning teenager who thought murder was a path to fame. Emma Blake was placed with her maternal grandmother in a neighboring county. She started a new school. She attended therapy twice a week. She didn't talk about the trial much, but when other kids asked about her brother, she said simply, "He did something bad. He's away now." She walked past cameras without looking back. She didn't want to be part of the story anymore. She just wanted to be 11. The Blake house, what remained of it, was eventually demolished. The lot sat empty for 2 years before the county purchased it and turned it into a small memorial park. A single plaque read, "In memory of David and Susan Blake, gone but not forgotten." The final courtroom photograph, the one that appeared in every news story, showed Kent being led away in handcuffs, his face pale and empty. No trace of the smile that had once dominated the trial. But in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was Emma, walking out the opposite door with her social worker, her back straight, moving forward. That image became the lasting one. Not the fire, not the smirk, but the girl who refused to let her brother rewrite the truth. And the empty space where his performance used to be.